A millionaire's car sat broken down on the side of the road. Stranded, frustrated, and waiting for help, he never expected that the person who would approach him was a little black girl, her hands skilled in ways that stunned him, but it wasn't just what she did, it was what he noticed afterwards. A small detail on her finger would stop him cold, forcing him to confront a truth far bigger than a broken engine. What could a simple ring reveal that left a man of power completely speechless? This is the story. For most people, childhood is filled with carefree afternoons and simple joys. For Maya, it was different. At just 10 years old, she had already learned that the world didn't always see her innocence first. She lived in a small, working-class neighborhood where families looked out for one another, and most days she spent tinkering with tools in her grandfather's garage. Cars fascinated her, their engines, their hidden puzzles, and her grandfather encouraged that spark, reminding her that skill had no color. It was supposed to be just another Saturday. The streets buzzed with life, neighbors talking across fences, children playing hopscotch on cracked sidewalks. Maya carried her small toolbox, a habit she'd picked up from helping her grandfather with odd jobs. She wasn't looking for attention, only another chance to practice what she loved, but down the road, gleaming like a jewel against the dust and grit of the neighborhood, sat a broken-down Mustang. Its owner, a man whose life seemed worlds apart from her, stood by the hood, frustrated and waiting. To Maya, it was just another car, another challenge. To him, it was an inconvenience. Neither knew their paths crossing that afternoon would reveal something far greater than a broken engine, something that would cut to the heart of how society decides who belongs and who doesn't. Maya walked up to the Mustang with the same quiet confidence she carried in her grandfather's garage. The millionaire, dressed in a crisp white shirt, an expensive watch, raised an eyebrow. At first, he didn't even acknowledge her, assuming she was just another curious child wandering to clothes. But when she placed her toolbox down and asked if she could take a look, he chuckled under his breath. The smirk wasn't about her age, but about who she was. A little black girl from a neighborhood he never thought about unless his car forced him there. Still, frustration made him step aside. To his surprise, Maya's small hands moved with certainty. She studied the engine, adjusted wires, and tightened bolts. Within minutes, the sound of life returned to the machine that had left him stranded. Neighbors nearby paused to watch. For them, it wasn't just about a girl fixing a car, it was about pride, about seeing one of their shine, but the man didn't smile. His expression hardened, as though each turn of Maya's wrench chipped away at something he believed to be true, that someone like her couldn't possibly know more than him, let alone be the reason his prized car roared back to life. When the Mustang finally started, the crowd clapped softly. Maya's face lit up, proud, expecting maybe a thank you. But instead, the millionaire's gaze dropped to her hand and froze. On her finger was a ring too delicate, too polished, too out of place for a child from her side of town. His mind didn't go to gratitude. It went to suspicion. The whispers began almost immediately. People wondered why a girl like Maya wore something like that. And in the millionaire's silence, the air grew heavy. He saw not her skill or brilliance, but a thief, a problem, a symbol of everything he had been taught to fear. One phone call was all it took. Sirens pierced the neighborhood minutes later. Police cars pulled up, lights flashing against cracked sidewalks and weathered porches. Officers stepped out, eyes not on the millionaire, but on Maya, her chest tightened, toolbox slipping from her grip. She was only 10, yet every ounce of innocence was stripped away at that moment. They questioned her, demanded answers, and treated her small frame as if it carried the weight of a crime. Her neighbors tried to speak up, shouting that Maya had done nothing wrong, that the ring belonged to her late mother, a piece of family history she wore with quiet pride. But voices from her community were drowned out by authority, dismissed, before they could matter. Maya's grandfather rushed to the scene, heart pounding as he pushed through the crowd. But by then, the image had already been painted. A black child accused, her skill erased, her humanity overshadowed by suspicion, and as the officers surrounded her, hands hovering near their belts, the question wasn't whether she had done anything wrong. It was whether she would even be allowed to prove her innocence. The Mustang's engine purred behind her, alive because of her hands. But the sound wasn't triumph, it was irony. Proof that even when she built, repaired, and gave, society was ready to break her down. The crowd held its breath. One wrong move, one raised voice, one flicker of resistance, and this moment could end in tragedy. And then it did escalate. The flashing red and blue lights painted the street in chaos. Maya stood frozen, her small hands trembling, the ring on her finger gleaming under the glare. Officers closed in, their voices sharp, their questions louder than her. Frightened breaths. To them, she wasn't a child anymore, she was a suspect. One officer reached for her wrist, yanking her forward as the crowd gasped. Her grandfather shouted, pushing through, but was shoved back. His pleas, she's just a child, that ring is her mother's, fell on deaf ears. Authority had already decided the story, a little black girl in the wrong place, wearing something she couldn't possibly deserve. The millionaire, standing feet away, said nothing. His silence screamed louder than the sirens. He watched the girl who had fixed his car now be treated as if she had stolen her existence. For Maya, the world blurred, hands gripping her arms, strangers' phones raised to record, voices mixing into a storm of fear and disbelief. Every second felt like forever. The officers barked for compliance, their hands hovering near their weapons. The crowd shouted for justice, terrified that one wrong move could make this moment irreversible. Maya's chest heaved. She wanted to scream, to explain, to show them the truth. But she knew children like her were rarely allowed to explain. The officer holding her tightened his grip, reaching toward the small ring as though snatching it would prove her guilt. Her grandfather's voice cracked through the noise. That's her mother's. You have no right, but the officer didn't stop, and in that instant before anyone could breathe, the story teetered on the edge of disaster. A child's innocence, a community's hope, a nation's wound balanced on the weight of a piece of jewelry. The Mustang's engine still rumbled in the background, the machine she had repaired without question, yet here she was, broken by a system that refused to see her worth. The crowd's silence deepened. Would this moment end in tragedy, or would someone finally speak up before it was too late? The officer's hand paused just long enough for the crowd's shouts to swell. Phones captured every angle. Neighbors refused to look away. And under that pressure, perhaps out of fear of being seen, perhaps out of guilt, the grip on Maya's arm loosened, the ring stayed on her finger. No arrest, no record. Just a little girl left shaken, her dignity stripped in front of her community. But while the squad cars eventually rolled away, the damage had already been done. Maya never forgot the feeling of cold suspicion in the eyes of men who were supposed to protect her. She never forgot the millionaire's silence. His refusal to speak up, even as a child, was treated like a crime. And she never forgot the sting of realizing that her skill, her innocence, her humanity could all be erased by prejudice in a single moment. Her story is not an isolated one. It's the echo of countless others' children, parents, neighbors who are judged not for what they've done, but for the color of their skin, for the assumptions wrapped around their very existence. The ring on Maya's finger wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a reminder of her mother, her family's history, and her worth. And yet, to others, it became an excuse to strip her of her innocence. This is the reality. Too often, black children are denied the right to be children. So the question we're left with is this: how many more Majas will it take? How many more stories must be told, recorded, lived before silence turns into action? Because if a little girl fixing a broken engine can still be broken down by racism, then the real question isn't about her, it's about us. What are we going to do to change it?